The Curse of Kaskaskia. When the first French settlers began to move southward and westward into the Illinois Territory, they began colonizing the fertile plain along the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River. A new settlement called Kaskaskia was started near the western edge of the region in 1703. For more than a century, it was the commercial and cultural capital of Illinois, although it was once a prosperous and thriving settlement. Little of the city remains today. Strangely, many believe that the city was destroyed because of an old curse, leaving nothing behind but a scattering of houses and ghosts. Many years ago, Kaskaskia was a part of Illinois mainland, a small peninsula that jutted out just north of present-day Chester. There still remains a portion of what was once Kaskaskia that is accessible from Illinois today, but the peninsula is now an island cut off from the state by a channel change in the Mississippi River that took place decades ago. Much of the area was flooded at that time and is now largely a ghost town, consisting of a few scattered homes and a handful of residents. The remains of the town, while still considered a part of Illinois, can now only be reached from Missouri. There is an ancient bridge between St. Genevieve and St. Mary's that crosses the Mississippi to the island. It is the only physical link to this desolate spot has to either state. Only a few scattered buildings remain to indicate that the city ever existed at all. The French settlers founded the vanished town, once considered the metropolis of the Mississippi Valley and the main rendezvous point for the whole territory. It also served as a springboard for explorations to the west and, in time, became the state and territorial capital of Illinois. The area grew, and Kaskaskia became a land office town in 1804, and the territorial capital in 1809. The town is made up of stone mansions and homes of typical French architecture that according to contemporary sources, were inclined to be shabby. Half of the inhabitants were of French or French-American Indian background. They raised cattle, horses, and hogs, and worked in small farms. The city also boasted a post office and a number of general stores, a hat shop, and 3 tailor shops. There was only one tavern in town, which was constantly overcrowded by state officials, soldiers, adventurers, and land speculators. In 1818, the state capital was moved to the new city of Vandalia in the central part of the state. Illinois had just gained its statehood, and legislators began searching for a place that was more centrally located than Kaskaskia. The move was made with some regret, but of course no one knew that the river city would be destroyed in just a few more years. About 25 years later, the waters of the Missouri began to shift in their channel, and flooding assailed the edges of Kaskaskia, destroying homes and farms. By 1881, the peninsula was completely cut off by the river, and the city nearly ceased to exist. But what happened to change the fate of this once marvelous city? Was it simply nature taking its course, or was it more dire circumstances? The cause of Kaskaskia's demise, according to some, there was a terrible curse placed on the town many years before that predicted the city and the land around it would be destroyed, that the dead would rise from the graveyard in eternal torment. Believe it or not, these events actually came to pass. The legend of the curse dates back to 1735, when Kaskaskia was a thriving community of French settlers. A wealthy fur trader lived there who was only remembered by the name of Bernard. He lived in a luxurious stone home in the company of his daughter Maria, a beautiful young girl who was the pride of his life. Bernard owned a trading post on the edge of the city, and he frequently hired local men, both French and Indian, to work for him. Most of the Indians were hired to do menial work, as Bernard cared little for them and considered them a necessary evil at best. He hired a young Indian to work for him who had been educated by French missionaries. As the two spent time together, Bernard actually began to become fond of the young man, at least until he realized that his daughter had also become fond of him. In fact, Maria and the Indian had fallen in love. When Bernard learned this, he became enraged. He immediately fired the young man and spoke to his friends and other merchants, who then refused to put him to work. Eventually, the young man left town. Before he left, he promised Maria that he would return for her. Maria was heartbroken by her father's actions. She pretended that nothing was wrong so as to not arouse her father's curiosity, but deep down she secretly hoped, waited, and watched for her return of her lover. Ooh. Several local men attended to court her, but while she feigned interest in their attentions, she secretly pinned away for the young man. A year passed, and one day a group of unknown Indians visited Kaskaskia from the west. Among them was Maria's lover. Wearing a disguise so that Bernard could not recognize him, Maria and her lover arranged to meet in a secret and then quickly fled Kaskaskia to the north. When Bernard learned what had happened, he vowed to seek vengeance on the Indian. He gathered several of his friends and began hunting his daughter and the young man. They captured them near Cahokia. Maria begged her father to understand, but he refused to hear her cries. He decided to kill the young man by drowning him. The Indian was silent as the rough trappers tied him to a log and then set him adrift on the Mississippi. Just as they placed him in the water, he swore a terrible curse. He swore that Bernard would be dead within the year, and soon he and Maria would be reunited forever. Kaskaskia was damned and would be destroyed, along with all of the land around it. The altars of the churches would be destroyed. The altars of the churches would be destroyed, and the homes along with them. Even the dead of Kaskaskia would be disturbed from their graves. The river then swallowed the Indian beneath the muddy water. He was silenced, but the curse eventually came to pass. Within the year, the prophecy began to come true. Maria became distraught over her lover's fate and refused to leave the house or eat. She soon died and joined her lover on the other side. Bernard became involved in a bad business deal and challenged the man that he believed to have cheated him to a duel. He was killed by the other man. The river also began to seek the Indians' revenge on Kaskaskia. The river channel shifted and flooded the peninsula over and over again until, by 1881, Kaskaskia was completely cut off from the mainland. The homes and farms were abandoned, and people began to slowly leave the island. The church was moved over and over again, but it did no good. The altar was eventually destroyed in the 1973 flood. In that year, Kaskaskia became more than a desolate ghost town. Eerily, the local cemetery washed away, and the bodies of those buried there erupted to the surface and vanished beneath the river. The dead of Kaskaskia, as predicted by the curse, had risen from their graves.